Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Sabrina Lin, the curatorial assistant and manager of student programs at the Bowdoin College Museum of Art. We are thrilled to be welcoming Geosactoma Neptune to campus today in conjunction with our exhibition, Innovation and Resilience Across 3 Generations of Wabanaki Basket Making, curated by members of Bowdoin's Native American Students Association, Amanda Casano, Sunshine Eaton, and Shanding Largo. The exhibition will be on view until Sunday, September 18th, so if you haven't had a chance to go see it, I would highly suggest you go stop by after today's presentation. On behalf of the museum, we would like to thank the Sexuality, Women, and Gender Center, also known as SWAG, the Center for Multicultural Life, Bowdoin Student Activities, as well as the Visual Arts and Art History Department for their support for today's visit. Today's program will consist of an artist presentation by Geo, followed by an opportunity for a Q&A session. I will now welcome to the stage leaders of the Native American Students Association, Amory Mallon and Cami Atsidi, to introduce Geo for today's program.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So before we begin introducing Geo, we're going to start with an introduction of ourselves. And the reason why we do this introduction is so that our family knows our history and our people. Yate shikedo shidene she'eya kemiatsiri nishia. Nakaith bahe nishle, hashkanazo bashishin, bilagana dashiche do kithachini dashinale. Montezuma Creek masi de nasha. The Native American Student Association welcomes all walks of life in an effort to reclaim our indigeneity. NASA's mission aims to increase awareness of Native cultures and perspectives on Bowdoin's predominantly white campus. NASA provides a safe healing space for all students who are passionate about tackling issues facing Indigenous peoples today. To reframe colonized ideologies surrounding education and ways of knowing, NASA believes that change comes from within community. We encourage you all to recognize the importance of Native voices and sovereignty in white spaces, as we are the backbone of existence. People of the dawn allow us to be here, for their truth is our truth. Their pain is our pain. With our breath, we carry words of healing, and with our hands, we write this prayer. And Amy will begin with her introduction.
Ikswa kwariwik, nahanko otana iete, ogapoga ga ami anete. We would like to respectfully acknowledge that Bowdoin College resides upon the traditional homelands of the Abenaki people. The Abenaki are members of the Wabanaki Confederacy, or the People of the Dawn, which include 5 member nations: the Abenaki, the Mi'kmaq, the Malseet, the Passamaquoddy, and the Penobscot. This was a site of trade, travel, gathering, and healing for the Wabanaki for more than 12,000 years. Today, each community maintains its own tribal government, community schools, cultural centers, and manages its respective lands and natural resources. Although most of Maine's Native people belong to one of these 5 federally recognized groups and reside on tribal lands, other Native people live in towns and cities across the state. We make this acknowledgement aware of the violations of water, territorial rights, and sacred sites across Wabanaki homelands, which are stewarded today by over 7,800 tribal members in the state. Indigenous people continue to protect and remain in relationship with the land and the waters, and will do so until the end of time. It is vital to honor these beginnings and recognize the ongoing dedication and importance of Indigenous culture within our communities and within the spaces that we gather, live, learn, and work on. Thank you for joining us today and acknowledging the stewardship of the Abenaki people.
We are so excited to introduce Modak Mikuk, Maine's own Passamaquoddy Two-Spirit, master basket maker, activist, storyteller, drag queen, designer, teacher, and trailblazer, Geosactoma Neptune.
Inspired by the many teachings and knowledge passed down from their grandmother, Molly Neptune Parker, Geo has continued to weave these stories and histories into their own life and art, Neptune's work seeks to bring recognition back to the never-ending contributions of Indigenous people in contemporary artistry.
As an Indigenous Two-Spirit artist, Neptune continues to break bounds designed through a colonized lens. Among the many recognitions and achievements GEOs have received for their contributions to contemporary craft artistry, one exciting feature is their recent selection in the Smithsonian's exhibit Sharing Honors and Burdens, Renwick Invitational 2023. By incorporating Indigenous knowledge passed down through generations, Neptune's arc seeks to bring recognition back to the Passamaquoddy practices that have and continue to be marginalized within Western society. We are so honored to have GEO here and present with us. On behalf of the Native American Student Association, we hope you will thoughtfully engage with GEO's art, knowledge, and stories.
Donabamok, Jeep Logan Dodem, Nujia Medak Miguk, Ejipalida Hazieli Baskadumuka, Naganazini Wasquan. Hello. My spirit name is Nizgabizuin, which translates to, roughly, it translates to two medicine spirits standing together as one person. I am from the Snowy Owl family. My clan, or my totem is the eagle, and I am from the community of Madakmiguk, of the Passamaquoddy people, or the Beskadmukadik, also known as the Pollock-Spearing people, and I am also a two-spirit. I have a lot of knowledge that I wish to share with you all today. I have some teachings that I have clearance from my elders that I am able to share outside of ceremony. And I also plan to talk a lot about my art. But to me, those things really aren't separable from one another. A lot of what I do in my art comes from who I am and my role in my community. So I hope I'll be able to paint kind of a cohesive picture for you all of what all of that means. But before I start, I wanted to start with a song for you all. So this song is, in English, we would call it the Children's Honor Song. It is a prayer to the spirit of the eagle to help Native children all over the world find their way back to their traditional ways. So when I sing that song, that's the energy that I'm putting out with my prayers, and the additional energy that I add a prayer for all of the two-spirit children that didn't grow up with the support that they needed to become who they were supposed to be. So with that, I hope you enjoy this song. Away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey, way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey, way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey, way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey, musum sui jeep lagan. Yalit we adiot skit komik, wajuk man wazizok, yuk tuk wazizok. Away, oh hey, away, oh hey, way, oh hey, away, oh hey, way, oh hey, away, oh hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Musum sui jeep lagan. Yalit we adiot skit komik. Naji giluahan. Wazizok, wazizok. Away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Musum sui jeep lagan. Yalit we ad yotskit komik. Musko an wazizok. Yuktuk wazizok. Away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Musum sui deep lagen. Yalit we ad yotskit komik. Milan knobizon. Wazizok. Wazizok. Away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Musum sui deep lagen. Yalit we ad yotskit komik. Gakiman skijin away. Yuktuk wazizok. Away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Away, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Way, oh, hey, away, oh, hey. Do you really want? Thank you. My ancestors are also asking me to acknowledge the thousands of children in the Canadian and American Indian residential schools that are still currently in unmarked graves and have still not found their way home. They also wish me to acknowledge in particular the group of children that Queen Elizabeth and her husband one day walked into the Canadian wilderness with and did not come back with. As I've already said, my spirit name is Nisgabizuin. Our spirit names in our community are meant to not only help us know how our ancestors and the spirits refer to us in our spirit form, but also are meant to help our community recognize our own roles within our community and help the person who receives the name step more fully into that role and become more fully themselves. Typically, these names would be given to people during rites of passage ceremonies as they are moving from adolescence and moving into young adulthood. Our naming traditions in my community were lost for many years and not practiced for many years. In fact, most of my younger siblings were able to get their spirit names before I did. I didn't receive my spirit name until I was almost 30 years old. So my name is Nisgabizuin. Bizuin comes from two different words. There's bizun, which is medicine, and then the ending uin, which denotes a person or a being. We use it for muin, the bear. We use it for bamausuin, the surface walkers, which are you and I. And a bizuin is a very powerful spirit, a medicine spirit, a spirit that is different from an ancestor or a human spirit, a more ancient and elemental spirit. And then Nizgab comes from another word. In our language, we would say Nizigavi, like there are two of them standing next to each other. But if you shorten it and you say Nizgab, it means that there are two of them, but they are not separated. They are standing as one. So Nizgab Izuin, two medicine spirits standing together as one being, but you can all just call me Gio. So while right now isn't the appropriate time for me to share the entire creation story, I can, and we would also need an entirely separate program in order for me to be able to do that. I do wish to touch upon the creation story. In the Wabanaki creation story, many of our stories were changed with the arrival of colonization and the arrival of Christianity as an attempt to make them align more closer to Christian creation stories and an attempt to get us to convert. So a lot of the knowledge that I've gained both as a storyteller and as a historian has come from not only researching our stories that were written down by white anthropologists and trying to remove their gaze from that story and literally remove their perspective and just get the cultural elements, but also learn from my elders in ceremony. And part of being a storyteller and entering that ceremonial space as a storyteller involves getting more bits of the story, getting more downloads, more messages from spirit as you are telling this story. And each storyteller is meant to put parts of themselves into the story and tell the story the way spirit wants them to tell it. So that's one reason that we purposely don't write our stories down, because the moment you write it down, people start to treat it as if it is an authority. So when I'm doing my lectures, I often will permit recordings to happen, but when I'm actually storytelling, that's when I say no, there can be no video recording of this, because I don't want people to think that my story, the way I tell it, is the only authority. I want other storytellers in my community to hear it, to see themselves in it, and to tell it the way that they're supposed to tell it. So part of our creation story begins with a lot of our creation stories started and was changed to begin with the creation of man. And I think that anybody knows that it is often very hard for a man to create other human beings all by himself. So as I've done this research, I realized that many of our creation stories went a bit further back, and there were original creation stories that were left out. So the Wabanaki creation story, as I tell it, actually begins with the story of Sky Woman or Star Woman, coming through the hole in the sky, coming from Pleiades, descending to this earth and creating this island that we all refer to, or most of us refer to, not all indigenous people, but many of us refer to North America as Turtle Island. She created the earth on the back of a giant turtle, and that was her home. As the story progresses, she became pregnant. She became pregnant with twins, Galuskab and Malsum. And one of those twins represented the forces of light and life, and the other twin represented the forces of darkness and death. And I want to make sure to disclaim that darkness and death are not the same as evil. You cannot have life without death. You cannot have death without life. You cannot have light without darkness. Both of those things were necessary and are necessary in our world in order for us to even exist. And so that permeation of darkness, of death as something that is evil, is something that very much came from the perspective of the colonizers. So when Galuskab was born, he was born with the purpose to then go and help create Wabanaki people. He was supposed to create a race of people to be here and be stewards on this earth. And he first created the stone people. And the little stone people became the tricksters and the fairies and the dwarves, or the Wanogamasizug that we would refer to them as. There were stone people about our size. There were also a few stone giants. Galuskab made a mistake by making people out of stone, because stones do not have hearts. They don't have the ability to feel. They don't have the ability to love or be kind. but they can become hot. They can become heated and angry. They can be cold and unforgiving. So all of these people that Gluskab created made a lot of damage here. And he was very hesitant to try again. And when he did try again, he went into his own ceremony, and he was told to listen, and to find something to make people from that did have a heart. And so as he continued his search, he heard a heartbeat coming from the woods, very similar to the way our drum beats are now today. And so he approached this tree with this loud reverberating sound coming from it, a heartbeat, the heartbeat from the earth, coming from the brown ash tree itself. And so Gluskab took his arrow and loaded it onto his bow, and he fired it at the brown ash tree and split the brown ash tree cleanly in half. So the spirit of that tree was also divided by Gluskab's arrow. What was once one spirit had now become two, with two different energies to both of those spirits. So Gluskab approached the tree, and he offered a trade. He said, I will turn you into Bamausu Inuuk. I will turn you into one of those that can walk on the surface. But in exchange, you must promise to be stewards of this place. You must promise to take care of the land, the water, the air, and all of the creatures and people that will eventually live here with you. You need to teach your children to do the same, and your grandchildren to do the same, and they need to teach their children as well. That is the exchange. That's the trade that I'm offering you. And so when the spirits agreed, Gluskab brought those spirits to life, and he gave them the breath of life and turned them into people. And the first Wabanaki woman and the first Wabanaki man stepped out from the ash tree side by side. And after that, as the spirits, more men and women came out of the tree, as the strength of those spirits started to dwindle, children came out of the tree, smaller people that would eventually grow into their own people. At the very end of the line, there wasn't enough left of each of those spirits to make another person, not even enough to make another child. So Gluskab approached the tree one more time. He took that last little piece of man and that last little piece of woman, and he recombined them. And the first two spirits stepped out from the very center of the tree. Someone who was what we would describe in English today as a third gender, but there were often up to 7 genders in Native American cultures. There were 7 genders specifically, or as we would describe it, 7 gender medicines in Wabanaki culture. Woman was the first medicine. Man is the second. Women loving women is the third. Men loving men is the fourth. Women nurturing and becoming masculine is the 5th. Men nurturing and becoming feminine is the 6th. And two-spirit is the 7th medicine. Someone who is born with equal amounts of those masculine and feminine energies. All of us are born with different amounts of those energies within us. But only two spirits are born with equal amounts of energies. And because those energies are equal and they are opposing energies that shouldn't exist in the same place, the fact that we are able to balance them in the same place means that we automatically bring balance to the world around us. So traditionally, each community would really only have 1 two-spirit, depending on the size of the community, because any more two-spirits meant that your community was out of balance. So one thing that I hear from elders today is that there are a lot more two-spirits being born all over the world, being born into cultures that didn't even have two-spirit traditions. More and more two-spirits are coming that we have to change our societal mindset around us. And the reason for that is because the world is so out of balance today that Creator is sending more and more two-spirits down to the earth to try and bring it back into balance again. So the first two-spirit for Wabanaki people was positioned between the rest of the people and the source of our creation, so that we could watch and make sure that the children followed their parents and knew the way to go, so that we could call out to the parents if they started to stray too far from our origins, and so that the two-spirit could always look back and be the first one to remember where it was that we came from. So today, two-spirit is a pretty modern term, different tribes would have different terminologies for these people. And these people all fulfilled very different roles within our society depending on the individual strengths of that one two-spirit. So one composed list that has come from Indian Health Services that are kind of the overarching themes that touch upon and are included in all two-spirit traditions include specialized work roles. We had different gender roles. We had different societal roles, different jobs in our societies that were not men's work or women's work. It was specifically work that was done by the two-spirit. So we had very specialized roles and special jobs that was considered only we could complete. Gender variation was another overarching theme, that these people did not, to use modern terminology, they did not strictly present as masculine or strictly present as feminine. There was a really wide range of gender variation and gender presentation in that way. There is also the spiritual sanction, and this is a part that many modern two-spirits are not at their own fault, are actively separated from. The urban two-spirits, two-spirits that grew up outside of their communities and don't even have access to their own ceremonies, that spiritual sanction is something that is missing, because there is an actual spiritual designation that happens in a lot of communities where the elders are the ones that actually confirm that you are two-spirit. It's not always a claim that it's not always a label that you are able to just claim for yourself. And out of respect for that, many modern two-spirits will use the term indigiqueer instead of claiming that role two-spirit, because they don't feel comfortable claiming that role without having that role within their own communities. And the fourth overarching theme was same-sex relationships and what we would describe today as homosexuality in general. So there is a modern tendency to try and say that two-spirit is more of a teaching and that most two-spirits were actually cisgendered and heterosexual. And this modern equation with two-spirits and the wider LGBTQ community is something that's coming from Western civilization, and I will firmly say that that is actually backwards. It is the promotion of two-spirits as cisgendered straight men that comes from the Western civilization. And while many Native people see all LGBTQ plus people as some form, some manifestation as two-spirit, we also say that that label two-spirit, at least for right now, is something that is only used by Indigenous people and is only used for us. And the reason we say that is because so many of our two-spirits don't even have access and don't even have the privilege to be able to use that label for themselves, even if they want to, and even if they do have that spiritual designation. So until we are able to give this label to everybody who is supposed to have it, we're not opening it up yet. And I think that eventually that may change. But that doesn't mean that if you aren't Native, you shouldn't listen to two-spirit teachings and you shouldn't let that medicine affect you and let it move with you. So just because you may not be able to claim that label for yourself, it doesn't mean that you can't take these teachings and integrate them into your life and use them to find your own balance. So I get this question a lot: what is a two-spirit? That term actually came directly from the Anishinaabemowin language. It came from Anishinaabemowin, and it is a direct translation of their word for these people, Nizimaniduok, two spirits. So in Passamaquoddy, we've learned that we would have had differentiations for people who were more masculine of center and people who were feminine of center. So masculine of center two spirits would be Nizimanduok, two masculine spirits, or naming them for the great masculine, Kchimindu. Whereas people who would be feminine of center, and the label that I use for myself is Niziniwesk, two spirits, and Niwesk is the feminine great spirit. And so I did actually make this little graphic identity myself, or this little thing myself to post on Instagram, so please feel free to use it, and you have my permission to share it wherever. But I really wanted to give people like a really easy visual aid to understand that Two-Spirit is not separable from all of these things. It is inseparable from Indigenous identity and culture, as well as inseparable from the LGBTQ plus spectrum. You can't have one without the other. They are, and so Two-Spirit and LGBTQ plus, while they're intersectional, they're not interchangeable. So we have gender identity, we have the societal role, we have the spiritual identity, sexual orientation, and in the middle overlap of all of those four things is the identity of the Two-Spirit. So one of the things that was a key component of colonization, and I do need to give credit to my good friend Alok Menon for helping me find this actual history, because it was a piece of knowledge that I received from Spirit, that like removing the Two-Spirit was how the colonizers convinced our men to disempower our women, because we were the intermediaries, we were the ones who provided the balance. And in reading many of my friend Alok's book reports and looking at some of the books that they like to read, that was actually a very active practice in colonization all over the world. One of the reasons that they used for justification to say, no, we need to colonize these people, we need to bring them Christianity, because they don't have clear differences between their men and their women. Their men look like their women look like their men. Their women are in leadership roles that should be held by men. There are these third gender beings that we can't tell if they are men or women, and they won't tell us if they are men or women. So it was very much part of the reason that they used to go and colonize other Indigenous peoples when they arrived in our places, saw that we had empowered women, and also saw that we had people who were not forced to choose between being a man and being a woman. And their justification was that because their differences between men and women were so clear, and the differences in the roles between men and women were so clear, that's what made them civilized and us uncivilized. So with Two-Spirits being that intermediary spot, being that intermediary between the sexes, and them coming and seeing that so many women were empowered, so many women were in actual position of power and making leadership decisions, they first started by hunting the Two-Spirits and removing them from the communities, demonizing us, changing our word for our spiritual people, which was Medawulin, in Anishinaabe, especially if you've learned about their medicine societies. And I forgot a part of my introduction. It's a new part that I'm learning to integrate, so forgive me, and forgive me, my ancestors and my animal helper who's yelling at me from my box over here. I'm first degree Medawin, and Medawin was once known as the secret society of the Ojibwe and their medicine societies, and it is now no longer underground, and it was part of our traditional spiritual practices here. Our prophecy said that the Ojibwe would leave the eastern door where they resided here with us 2,000 years ago and take our traditions west, while we stayed here to fight and to delay the colonizers, to give them a chance to preserve it. Okay, you have to let me talk. So part of that demonization was the change from Medawin or Medawulin, and the actual translation meaning person of a good heart, and changing that word to witch or devil. And I've heard my own elders hear the word Medawulin in ceremony, which was our word for our spiritual healers, and turn to his wife who didn't speak Passamaquoddy and say Medawulin means devil. But that is not what it means. It means a person of a good heart. And I'm supposed to say that I am first degree Medowan now. So I apologize, not just to you, but to my ancestors and to you for getting that part of my introduction. But removing our spiritual practices was also a big part of that colonization, changing those spiritual practices, and was a big part of why it all went underground. When I first heard the term Two-Spirit, it very much gave me the impression that that wasn't something I wanted to be called. It didn't sound like a compliment. There was a ring to it. There was a certain insult behind it. It seemed like it wasn't a term of honor. And so I was privileged enough to go to a private school in Western Maine and had the opportunity to do my own research on American history, and I chose to research Two-Spirits because there were no teachings in my own community, no writings about Two-Spirits anywhere on the East Coast, at least at that time. This is revealing my age a little bit, but this would have been 2005, when I was starting to do a lot of this research and trying to find our own Two-Spirit traditions, if they even existed. And the more I started to find was not only were so many of these traditions similar in the terms of the themes that they had, but they would manifest differently in the different regions and nations that they showed up in, was that there was this huge gap on the East Coast. And the reason for that is that we went through the process of colonization for 200 years longer than all of the tribes west of the Mississippi. So for 200 years, we had loss of language, loss of culture, loss of practices. For those 200 years, everybody west knew that the colonizers were coming. They knew to prepare. They knew that we were fighting them back and buying them time. And so now out west, they often have, I don't want to equate it with the American holiday, but literally Thanksgiving ceremonies, ceremonies where they give thanks to us and pray to our ancestors for the sacrifices that we made, and pray to our living people so that we will one day get all of those things that we lost back. And they do it as a thank you for sacrificing so much. So they had 200 years to prepare and to get ready and to prepare themselves to not lose all of those traditions. So by the time I learned about these traditions and I actually approached the Bear Clan mother in my tribe, and in many societies, at least in the Northeast, Bear Clan is in charge of our medicines and in charge of our spiritual practices, which is why I went to her. And I asked her what our Passamaquoddy Two-Spirit traditions were, what our Wabanaki Two-Spirit traditions were. And this sentence on the top of the slide was her reply. I'd heard about Two-Spirits when I was a little girl, but we don't have those anymore. And it was really hard for me to hear because I knew that I was a Two-Spirit. And she said, we don't have those anymore. And I was like, but I'm right here in front of you. When I first came out of the closet, so to speak, and as many queer people learn, we often come out of the closet several times throughout our life. I also come out of the wigwam sometimes. But I had originally come out as bisexual, then came out as gay, then came out as non-binary and trans, and now loop back around to bisexual. But I had come out to my grandmother and to my mom, and my grandmother, who was raised Catholic, even though she spoke fluent Passamaquoddy. That was actually one of the ways that the priests were able to convert us and to convert our people, was rather than try to force us to learn English, which was not successful for hundreds of years, they learned Passamaquoddy instead, translated the Bible and the Lord's Prayer into Passamaquoddy, and that's how they got us to go to church, especially after the second wave of smallpox hit our community, and the only person who wasn't getting sick and wasn't dying was the white priest who said, I can save you if you abandon your religion and you pray to my God. That's how I'm surviving this sickness, because I pray to Jesus and you don't. And so our elders began praying to Jesus, and by the time my grandmother was born, like church was something that was required of her. She was hit in school for speaking Passamaquoddy, even though she didn't speak English, and forced to go to church. By the time, even before she died, even trying to talk to her about it, it was very much her saying, like, no, like, I go to church because those are my spiritual beliefs. Those beliefs are other people's beliefs. Smudging is other people's beliefs. That's why I go to church. And I go to church because if I don't feel right. Like, I don't feel good. I feel like I have a hard week. And it's because she used to be physically beaten for not going to church. And she wouldn't talk about that. And so when I came out, one of the things that she said to my mother was, I know the elders said that Gio would be special and help our people, but I didn't think that they meant he would be two-spirited. So a lot of this path has honestly felt lonely. I didn't have and still don't have two-spirit elders in my community that know our traditions and can bring those back. It wasn't until I was nearly 20 years old I discovered one of the medicine people and actual medical doctors in our community. She started out as a medicine person and then went and got her doctorate so that people couldn't say she wasn't a doctor. She got her medical doctor's degree and then continued practicing traditional medicine with it. Her name was Dr. Deanna Francis, and she was my two-spirit elder, and I lost her in my early 20s. And as I've been going through my spiritual training, I realize now that I very much did not lose her, and she's still very much with me. But having to be your own elder as a two-spirit is very much a common occurrence. There's no one teaching us how to listen to Creator and how to listen to ourselves. We have to find that path for ourselves. And so a lot of the work that I do is I'm trying to make sure that future two-spirits don't have to search for their elders. That when they find themselves and they want to find this path, this work is already going to be done for them. And it's going to be a map to show them that way home. So this took a lot of messages from Creator, from the ancestors, and from spirits, which, even as we are going through our mental health system, like, we can't openly talk about these things when we go to the doctor. So many of our medicine people were misdiagnosed as schizophrenic and placed into mental institutions and heavily medicated because they talked about the spirits. So for a long time, even now, a lot of our youth who I know are communicating with the spirits because the spirits are telling me, they're afraid to acknowledge it. They're afraid to embrace it. And many of them turn to substances as a way to dampen it, a way to tune it out, because it's been so demonized for so long. So one of the most affirming messages that I got was in a ceremony with my elders, Sherry Mitchell and Ron Tremblay at Healing Turtle Island. We were performing a children's blessing, and I was singing that song that I sang you all at the beginning of my program. And the elder who was doing the blessing stopped in the middle of the line of children, and he approached me and blessed me as if I was one of the children that he was blessing. And then skipped over my friend next to me who was like, ah, and went back to the children. And so he approached me afterwards and he said that the ancestors wanted me to do that because they can still sense fear in your heart. And they want you to let go of that fear because your ancestors love you, your people love you, and your people need you, and they need you to be who you are supposed to be. And that was also the very first time I had ever worn a skirt out of drag performances in public and to a ceremony. And he said, the final message that I have for you is that the way you're dressed right now is the way Creator wants you to dress all the time. Like a quote-unquote traditional woman. Not traditional woman as you might think in the Western sense, but a traditional woman in the indigenous sense, as a woman who follows our traditions and dresses traditionally. And that was a really big message for me to receive. It is amazing to see how differently strangers will treat you because of the size of the piece of fabric that you choose to drape over your body. And how much this piece of fabric can bother other people and really get them riled up and get them upset. And it made me very scared because it meant that I wasn't going to rely on my ability to pass as a cisgender person anymore. I was going to be very actively, visibly queer all the time. And so that was a heavy message to receive, but I also knew that it was one that I needed to receive, and it's one that I don't regret listening to. Another message that I received when I first went to the Medeo Lodge, right before the pandemic, from my elder Pauline. I hadn't even met her yet, and I wasn't even sure that she knew who I was, and she walked into that lodge, and she was like, "I'm looking for Gio. Where's Gio? I have a message for Gio." And she approached me and she said, "The ancestors want you to know that you're supposed to walk with that rainbow and not behind it. When you walk behind the rainbow and you push it out in front of you, it pushes people away from you. They see that rainbow first and it pushes them away. It acts as a shield. You need to integrate it and you need to walk with it. You need to embrace it and walk with it, because when you walk with it as part of you, it draws people to you. It allows them to come close to you. It allows them to receive your medicine. And the elders were telling me after these two messages that my medicine is so powerful that it affects people the moment they even look at me. And that is something that I have to not be afraid of, because different people are going to react to that medicine in different ways. I mentioned in ceremony this past weekend that I know a lot of men look at me and they see the adult men from their childhood that hurt them, that sexually abused them. And I told them, I was like, that feeling is mutual, because when I look at you, I see the men that hurt me. But hopefully we can look at each other, and instead of seeing the people that hurt us, we can actually see each other as human beings. And we can learn from each other's medicine and heal from it. And so this is why I do my best to live in such a way that I'm trying to uncover these traditions and make it known for the future Two Spirits in our communities that it's okay for them to be who they are, that they were once embraced, once accepted, and once integral parts of our society. I do this because death by suicide is the leading cause of death in Indigenous youth, ages 5 to 24. All across Turtle Island, it is the leading cause of death of Indigenous youth. And LGBTQ youth are 5 times as likely to attempt suicide than other youth. And this link, we've just found out, is no longer active, not that you can click it. But I did get this information both from SAMHSA and from GLSEN, if you would like to go and look at those statistics yourselves. So I feel like a lot of people may ask what exactly it is that you can actively do to make room for Two Spirits. And so some of the things that I've compiled as a list is just to use trans people's names, use gender variant people's names, no matter how many times they change it. No matter how many times it doesn't make sense to you, it's not about you. It's about respecting that person as they want to be respected and they want to be identified, and the name that they choose to call themselves. So you can use people's names using correct pronouns. It seems like such a basic thing to do and a simple thing to do that so many people just don't. And I will say that you can ask for someone's pronouns, what are your pronouns? And it is not, the only people I've ever heard offended by the question, what are your pronouns, are actually cisgendered people. It's not gonna offend trans people. You can correct others when they dead name or misgender people. normalizing the use of pronouns and in introducing your pronouns, regardless of whether or not you are trans, including gender variance in your company's policies and mission statements, thinking about these things when you choose who to vote for, thinking about these things as you teach, listening to trans people and other gender nonconforming people, and believe us when we tell you our stories and our experiences. Some of the most, I would say, the core integral texts that I've discovered in my Two-Spirit research. These are 3 of the book covers that I've found. There's the Two-Spirit People, which is this long anthology of many different authors, but edited by Sue Ellen Jacobs, Wesley Thomas, and Sabine Lang. And that's just Two-Spirit People. The second book is Two-Spirit People, American Indian Lesbian Women and Gay Men by Lester Brown. A third resource that I would recommend is The Zuni Man Woman by Will Roscoe. Reading this story, I feel very connected to Wewa, the woman in the photo. She was known as the Zuni princess. She was actually a Zuni delegation. She was an Zuni ambassador to Washington, D.C. eventually, where she went and continued to present as female. One of my favorite stories about her was she was determined to get one of those big fascinator hats, the big derby hats that all the other fancy white women had. And when she finally did, she walked proudly through Washington, D.C. with her fancy hat and her Zuni dress on. And some of the accounts of this woman, like from the people in D.C., they were just like, yeah, that Zuni princess, she was real tall, really strong. She's got such a deep voice, such big hands. But isn't she just the loveliest woman? I think we should invite her over to tea on Sunday. So it was like they would dance around the subject and then just go the other way and not acknowledge this person's transness because they didn't have the cultural capacity to do so, but still accepted her in their society because of her role within her own society and her reputation in the Zuni community. So she eventually did return back to her community before the end of her life, and that's where she passed. This is one of the most important texts that I have found now. This was just recently published. Mi'kmaq Bo'owanoch, and Bo'owin is a powerful person. Bo'owanoch is more than one. So this would be the Mi'kmaq equivalent word to a Medawalin or Medawin. Mi'kmaq Bo'owanoch, Two-Spirit Medicine, Sexuality and Gender Variance, Spirituality and Culture. And this is a book that was compiled both by Dr. Joseph Randolph Bowers and Elder Dr. Daniel N. Paul. So they did a lot of work uncovering these Wabanaki Two-Spirit traditions, looking at our stories, looking at the origins of the stories and what was changed. And one of the most crucial pieces of this text that I've learned were the 7 gender medicines from Wabanaki society that I shared with you already. And the other was that Gluskab's family was representative of all of these pillars that Wabanaki people needed in our society. So Gluskab, the first man, as many people call him, represented the medicine of men. His nephew, the pine marten, was, my animal helper wishes me to tell you that that's who he's named after, but I can't say his name. But he does want you to know that he's named after Gluskab's nephew. He's very insistent, I'm sorry. And at this point, I've learned when I don't listen to the spirits, things tend to go very wrong for me. So even if I seem a little crazy, I just follow their instructions. So his nephew, the pine marten, represented not only men's medicine, but our children. His grandmother represented women and our elders. And the only piece of that puzzle that was missing, when you look at that story, is the first Two-Spirit. And then they start examining the Gluskab stories his powerful Medowlin, his powerful spiritual stories, his stories with the witch, a witch in our stories who was the only person, the only Medowlin who could shapeshift into the opposite gender. No other Medowlin had powers that strong. Even when they did shapeshift, there was some sort of tell. The rabbit magician was one of the most powerful magicians in our stories, and even when he shapeshifted, he couldn't hide his ears. So if he turned into a chief, the chief had 2 big feathers on his headdress. If he turned into a little boy, the little boy had 2 cowlicks that stood up, like there was always a tell. And one of the things that made people fear this female Medowlin, and I still am working on finding her name and finding some of her true origin stories that are away from that Christian demonization, was that she was the only one who could fully transform her appearance, and you couldn't tell it was her. And that was what made her so feared, and what made her such an incredible reputation. So between the stories of Gluskab and that female Medowlin, who I'll refer to for this time as the tree stump woman, as well as his love story with the loon. In our original stories, now they describe the loon as the tattler, or Gluskab's messenger. The very original story was that the loon was Gluskab's lover, and the loon was male. Ogwym was a man. And when Gluskab left to prepare for the battle against the colonizers to go and make arrowheads in his lodge behind the rising sun, Ogwym was very sad, and he said, "Why are you leaving me? Like, you can't leave me here." And Gluskab said, "I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm going to give you a gift." And as soon as he presented Ogwym with the gift, this ache began in Ogwym's heart. He said, "Gluskab, why did you give me this gift? This gift hurts. It's more painful than anything I've ever experienced. Why did you give this to me?" And Gluskab said, "I gave you the gift of longing. I gave you the gift of missing someone. I gave you that gift so that you would not forget me or our love, because I'm going to be gone for a very long time." And so now Loon cries out on the lakes and the oceans at night, calling out to his lover Gluskab, calling out that love and missing him. And so based on those stories, they're not only saying that not only was Gluskab the first man, he was the first two-spirit, that all other two-spirits were created in the likeness of. And so two-spirit in the 21st century means a lot of different things. We don't have the same societal supports that we used to have, and we don't have the same traditions that we used to have. So now we have LGBTQ plus people, we have indigiqueer, we have all of these different ways to bring these medicines forward. This is my grandmother, Molly Neptune Parker. We lost her during the first year of the pandemic because the doctors didn't believe her about how much pain she was in her stomach, and would not ultrasound her stomach, and did not find the stomach cancer until it had already spread throughout the rest of her body. Doctors, white doctors in particular, not believing women of color about their pain is a very common experience. I began weaving with my grandmother when I was 4 years old. I actually began weaving without her because she kept saying that I had to wait until I was older, and as a 4-year-old, that was the worst thing you could possibly say to me. As you may or may not notice, I'm very strong-willed and opinionated, and that has not been an onset. That has been present since I was a kid, and my grandmother very much knew it. So when she said I had to wait till I got older, I went and found another basket maker who did not say I had to wait until I got older, and I came home with my first basket, and I set it down in front of my grandmother. After that, she agreed to teach me. And so that basket on the left is the very first basket I made with my Aunt Duzelin. My grandmother would always joke, no offense, Auntie Duzelin. She would always say, I can tell you made it with Duzelin. And then the basket on the right is the one that I made with my grandmother later that fall, the first basket that we made together. She described it as the longest day of her life because anytime she tried to do any step for me, even I just turned 5 at that time, I ripped it out. I would not let her weave my basket for me. I insisted on doing it myself. And if she tried to do it when I wasn't looking, I would notice and I would rip that out and start again. So it was a very long day in her kitchen for her. And we wove that little red candy basket with the white handle on it. And I remember at some point thinking that even though she said my basket was done, it just wasn't quite geo enough. Like there was something missing. So I tried to find crayons in her house. I was very disappointed because they were Rose Art crayons and I was strictly a Crayola artist. But to those Rose Art crayons' credit, they stayed on that basket for 30 years afterwards, just as bright as they were. And I remember waiting for her to go to the bathroom or to leave for the store and be distracted because I knew if she caught me, she would stop me. So I had my crayon stashed, and as soon as she was gone, I grabbed my first basket and I added all of those little crayon markings onto the white handle. I wanted to make a pattern. I was pretty limited in what my pattern knowledge was, so I drew inspiration from Lucky Charms. And I was like, I can do a heart, can't draw a star, can't draw a horseshoe, can't draw a clover. So I got some circles and squares and triangles and then the hearts. I think I did attempt one star in the middle. And I remember being very angry that it wasn't perfect when I was done. So I had to take my basket and I had to make it more me. And my grandmother was so disappointed. She was so mad when she saw that you ruined your first basket. I was like, I vehemently disagree. I think I just improved it a lot. And so that was very much how our relationship went for the rest of her life. She wasn't just my grandmother, she was my best friend. Even when I was in college, in an undergrad and not able to talk to her directly every day, I would call her and she would say, I was just thinking about you. Or I'd be sitting in my dorm room thinking about my grandmother and my phone would ring and it would be her. So now I know whenever I'm thinking about her, she's thinking about me too. This strawberry basket is my grandmother's most famous basket. It was something that her mother made and her grandmother made. We made it on this mold right here, which has been handed down to me from my grandmother. It's the only mold we know like it, where there's a mold for both the bottom and the cover, so that every time you weave the berry basket cover, it's a perfect fit. We estimate it to be over 200 years old because we know it belonged to her grandmother, and we don't know where she got it before that. More than likely from her mother. And so my grandmother always wove large red berries, and I would weave the smaller, unripe berries as a way to keep that berry tradition going, but also make it my own. So I would always tell the story that my grandmother is the ripe berry, and I'm the berry that's still growing, and that I wouldn't make an all red berry until she passed that mold to me, until she handed it to me and said, I can't make baskets anymore, and it's your turn to keep making this strawberry. Receiving that mold didn't happen the way either of us hoped it would. But the first basket that I made after she passed was a full red berry. And I have that at home. This is my second full red berry. And the Field Museum in Chicago is very, very patiently waiting for it. It was supposed to be there a long time ago. But that's where that's going to go with some of my other red berries. So that's my grandmother's berry and one of mine. As I got older, I really started to fall into my own style and working with different colors. My style tends to be either completely natural colors of ash or completely unnatural colors of ash. I tend to go to, which is very two-spirit of me, to go one extreme or the other. These are some of the baskets that I was making at the time that I received the title of Master Basket Maker from my elders. I was and still am the youngest Master Basket Maker in the main Wabanaki tribes. And this was my variation of a traditional sewing kit, which my animal helper's house was made by my great-grandmother Frances just a few months before I was born and before she passed away. We never did get to meet, but we had that connection in our baskets. And so this was kind of my variation of that with the scissors fob and the little pin cushion, which are all woven. Eventually I did make a thimble basket as well to hold that antique thimble. These are not only my strawberries, my blackberry, and then my blueberry in the middle, which I call an extraordinary. And then my unexpectedly famous rainbow corn that has blown up and gotten me recognition. For a long time, I was really afraid to make baskets that were quote unquote too gay. Like I didn't think people would want to buy the baskets that I really wanted to make. And the more I started to make the baskets that I was afraid to make, that I'd only kept in my head, the bigger the response was to my art. So the Passamaquoddy word for corn is biaskaman. So I called this piece biaskaman. And in English, gaze, G-A-I-Z-E. So that is also now one of my most requested baskets. And my grandmother and I's biggest secret was that we both really hated making corn baskets. My grandmother, every time she made a corn basket, would swear she was never going to make one again. And she would up the price on it and it would sell. And then she'd be like, calling me on the phone, like, how did I make this corn cover last time? Just like, you said you weren't going to do it again. She's like, I know, but I needed the money. But we both, like she in particular in her corn baskets, like really hated making them because they take a really long time. But when they're done, they're so beautiful. There used to be this teaching that if we got angry at any point making our basket, you had to throw it away and start again. You couldn't even use the same materials. If that were a teaching that my grandmother and I followed, we would have never made a single basket. None would get completed. So this piece, Abikjilu Bayans the Sun, is currently here at its new home at the Bowdoin Museum, the Bowdoin College. But what is it?
Bowdoin College Museum of Art.
Thank you, Bowdoin College Museum of Art. And this is one of my storytelling pieces. It tells the story of Abikjilu, who became, and I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to paraphrase. He became angry at Gluskab and attempted to get revenge by tying up the sunbird, tying up Gizus. It was her job to open her wings every day on the top of her mountain and give the world sunlight. So he bound her and tied her up and threw her into a ravine. And when Gluskab went to rescue her, he was only able to get one of her wings free. So now she has to stand on top of her mountain with one wing always extended and the other one bound to her side. And she slowly turns so that half the world has daylight and the other half can sleep in darkness. So the half of the basket where her wing is bound down represents night, and then the half of the basket where her wing is open and extended represents the rising sun and the sun turning. And so all of these baskets, like the standers, were like individually dyed the different sunlight colors. This piece I called the Spirit Road. No, Spirit Road was a piece I made after this. This was Ceremony of the Singing Stars. And I made this piece a year after the Pulse Orlando massacre, when I remember, I very distinctly remember the number was 49 people lost their lives that night, 49 queer people. So I made this piece as an honor piece and an homage piece to them. And on this piece is Chickadee, Gujigikulas, and she's carrying her birch bark pot. And her birch bark pot is filled with bear soup. So she's bringing bear soup to all of those spirits that need it, that need to be nourished, including those that are still living, as well as helping shepherd people up to the sky, up to the spirit world. I called this one Bilwabid, the powerful one. And I made this as a bit of a self-portrait. I designed my own regalia. I beaded it out of the deer skin that I was able to get my hands on at the time. And so she is a partially leather, partially basket doll. And her regalia is very distinctly and noticeably to Wabanaki people a mix of men and women's regalia. Typically that cap would only be worn by men and only be worn by shamans. And when it was worn by a woman, it was because she was a two-spirit. And she was very powerful. Otherwise, women wore the single peak. And so she's got her little animal helper in her hand, her hummingbird. And so this is one of the pieces that will go to the Renwick, as is Abiktilu Binds the Sun. This piece will also be featured at the Renwick. This is owned by one of my private collectors. I made a 10-inch, so it's considerably bigger than my helper's house here. It is a 10-inch cedar bark flat. And this took so much work and innovation to use the two different materials together. Because as I learned, as I was making this basket, cedar bark shrinks when it dries. And it constricts, so every time I made the cover, it was a cover that didn't fit the bottom of the basket. I remade that cover 4 times. I had started this basket once before, and my dog destroyed it. It took a couple of, this was 3 or 4 years of work on top of each other. This is one of my most recent berries. This one is probably about that big. And I was really particularly proud of this because I figured out how to weave a strawberry blossom with only 5 petals instead of 8. And one of the other things that is a big part of what I do, and how I used to say I embraced my two-spirit identity was by doing drag and doing drag performances. I once had a dream of being able to be on RuPaul's Drag Race wearing nothing but native fashion. I let go of that dream a while ago because I don't even know if I want to be on that show anymore. I am now at a point in my career and my wardrobe where I could actually do that. If I was in a show or anything like that, I would be able to wear nothing but pieces by other Native American designers because I was really tired of seeing white women in faux buckskin and plain style headdresses walking down the runway and being praised for it when modern Native fashion is so much more than that. So these were some of my first photo shoots and my first ever magazine cover. I was on the cover of Native People's Magazine during Pride Month as a two-spirit drag queen. So I did this photo shoot, and this was very early on in my career, and my makeup has improved significantly since then. This was another shot from that same photo shoot. So in these previous ones, I'm wearing DeConti & Brown accessories. This is by Tammy Beauvais, and beadwork by my friend Hollis Cheeto, and earrings by Indigenous Princess. These are pieces by Bethany Yellowtail, and a scarf by B. Yellowtail and Jamie Okuma. More Bethany Yellowtail, a purse by my friend Jennifer Pictou, DeConti & Brown. This is much closer to what my more modern drag look looks like after I shaved my hair into the scalp lock and started feeling like I found my own, a little bit more my own style, which was still an amalgamation of all of the other queens and divas that I've ever looked at. I mean, I'm inspired by Sasha Velour, Janet Jackson, the Spice Girls, Angina, like these bald queens that came before me. And I try to, kind of incorporate them into a lot of my looks while wearing Indigenous fashion. Another of my more modern drag looks with my portrait earrings of Matoka. You may know her as Pocahontas. There's only one existing portrait of Matoka in history, and she's in full English garb, just like that. She's wearing the top hat and the Victorian collar, and that's the only picture of her that exists. Eventually, I was performing under the drag name Lesbienne, and my career was taking off to such a point that I could not make two people famous and two people successful, so I dropped my drag name and started performing under my own name. And when I came out as Two-Spirit and non-binary, you know, I really saw it as me stepping away from like separating parts of myself and saying like, oh, like this is George and this is Liz. And I decided to be my full self all the time, and I was no longer George or Liz, I was Gio. Oh. And so this is a coat by Jamie Okuma and a garment that I would call the parachute wrap dress, I guess we're gonna call it. It's a garment that I made as I'm, you know, starting to get more into the world of fashion design, and I made that from Jamie Okuma's scarves. And what I love about this dress, it truly is, I wouldn't say it's one size fits all, but it is one size fits most, and I really mean that. And every person I've tried it on, it looks stunning. No matter, I've tried it on many different heights and many different body types and shapes, and everybody is able to find a way to tie it that it looks incredibly flattering on them. So I do plan to release a lot of these and like do a video on like how they tie and show people that like no matter what your body looks like, and especially designing for people with larger bodies, like these garments are going to be designed for them. More photo shoots that I've done just as Gio. And one of my other favorite photos from my friend Angoba that we did out in the desert. Thank you all for listening to me today. I know we have microphones available for questions, and I'm here and available for you. If you have not signed up for the student workshop, you're gonna miss out because it's gonna be pretty informal and just kind of mostly demonstration things and a chance for you to ask whatever questions you may want and to chat with me for a bit. But again, thank you all for your time today. Thank you for listening to me. Thank you for welcoming me and asking me to bring my medicine to this space. Chiwili. I'm not done. I gotta keep the mic. So if anybody does have questions, feel free. And if you don't, that's how you can find me and message me after. I'll make sure to check any message requests in my Instagram, specifically for students here. Hi.
Hi, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's really, there's no words. It was really beautiful.
Chiwili.
I guess it's a kind of a question about your fabrics too. They're
Yes.
just so beautiful. Do you paint them or?
These are actually, I have two on. I've got them layered because that makes them nice and flowy. This is a skirt made by Jamie Okuma. So she's a bead worker and a fashion designer. So after she does her huge showstopper beadwork pieces, she digitally photographs them and
Oh my
makes her
gosh, and
own
then creates
prints.
the fabric.
And then so the one underneath is actually a print of flowers and baskets from the Southwest.
Wow. So that was all beaded to begin
So it was
with.
all beaded to begin with, like all of these pieces, you can see the individual beads. Yes, absolutely, totally. And then you can see the beadwork there.
Oh my gosh. They're gorgeous. You wear them so nicely.
Thank you. So she's the model that I most often model for at Santa Fe Indian Market. She is on Instagram at j.okuma. And if you want to get her stuff, keep an eye out for when she releases her capsule collections, because she releases a capsule collection and then that's it. She doesn't release them again, so you have one chance to buy them. I set an alarm. I've even upgraded my internet speed, so good luck beating me. Like buying native clothes and earrings can be a competition. You got to be the fastest one, and don't hesitate. Just buy it, because it will sell out. Yeah. And she does sell these fashions for everyone. I know that a lot of people wonder if they're allowed to wear pieces by native fashion designers, but so many of us are actively creating pieces without those super significant spiritual and cultural symbols on them so that they can be worn by everyone. So a good rule of thumb is if the artist is selling it, it's okay for you to wear it.
Gio, thank you for a wonderful presentation. And I love the way in which you spoke about your own personal path and self-discovery as a way of opening up your art making. And I was just interested if you found as a creator and a maker that your own path of self-discovery ended up affecting the way in which you crafted your baskets or the way in which you approached artwork more generally. And if that's the case, I wondered if you might be able to speak a little bit about the push and pull between sort of conscious self-discovery and making, and the way in which perhaps making played a role in that, and the way in which self-discovery did, just that sort of synergy or push-pull. Thank you.
I do definitely see both of those things as very connected, because I mean, at least for me, looking back on my work, and I'm very fortunate to have had my work collected by museums since I was about 11 years old, so that there is this really long and clear path of like this trajectory that my work took, where like you can really start to see the turning points where I stopped making baskets because they were the traditional baskets and they were what would sell, and I started putting more of myself into it and putting my own vision into it. And as I started doing that, I became to step more and more into myself as my person, as a two-spirit. And as I did that, my artwork continued to change and continued to evolve. So I very much see both of those things as directly connected. And one thing that I think I didn't mention was that traditionally, fancy basket making in particular was a woman's art form. And even though, you know, I can't discredit Rocky Keyser and Kenny Keyser because they were fancy basket makers. But even when I started making fancy baskets, they were the only male fancy basket makers at that time. And since then, like more men have started making fancy baskets, but traditionally they would do the work of harvesting the tree and pounding the tree and helping with the utility baskets, like these ones that you would see here, which if you want a utility basket, there's no better utility basket maker than Gabriel Frey. Good luck getting on his client list, but if you can do it, do it. So those things for me were very much interconnected, and I really felt, I mean, it's been a crazy experience because I think that as queer people, we are so braced and poised to be ready to experience the opposite, to be ready to not be embraced, to not be celebrated. And I'm very fortunate that my experience has been the opposite of that, that the more I stepped into myself, the more I was embraced and recognized, and the more I put myself into my artwork and made the artwork that I really wanted to make, such as these, my berry earrings, the bigger response they got at shows, and the more people noticed it. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Any other questions, even if it's about my dress?
Thank you very much. That was wonderful. How long did it take you to weave the basket on view in the museum of the dark
That
and
basket, not including the dye and the material prep, that was 40 hours of weaving.
light? It's really tremendous. It's beautiful.
Thank you. And the dyeing, like even just dyeing those colors, that was one 12-hour day, like trying to get all of the colors in the weavers.
Hi, Gio. Thank you so much. My heart is very full after listening to your talk. It was so beautiful. I was just wondering if you could talk about your spirit animal and your, I just noticed that in your publicity photo you have your dog and you have the chickadee on your basket and butterflies on your garments. And if you could, I'm an animal person, so if
Yeah.
you could just talk about your connection to the, animals and if that informs your art and your spirit animal.
I mean, I think it very much does. I didn't have my spirit animal confirmed in ceremony until after I got my spirit name. I did receive messages that it was eagle, but like growing up as a Northeast, like everybody wants eagle as their spirit animal. It's like the coolest one. You got eagle, wolf, and bear, and those are those are like all the top. So like of course, like it was like I can't just like say that I'm an eagle. But even telling my elder about that, she performed my ceremony, and she was like, "Your spirit animal showed up. Guess who?" And it was the eagle. So for me, and in our traditions, like our clan animal represents our family line. So my grandmother's clan was the Snowy Owl clan. And so that's what we were named for, and that's how we kept our family line straight. My spirit animal, or my clan in the Medewan Lodge, is the eagle. And that is, some people describe it as the form, and I think this is probably the most accurate way to describe it. That's the form that my spirit takes when it becomes an animal, and it learns from those other eagles. I also have many different animal helpers that I've discovered throughout, and they are similar to spirit animals, but they don't work with you all the time. They show up at certain times and at certain points in your life when you need them. So a lot of those helpers for me have been hummingbirds and butterflies. And I have always had like this connection with animals, even when I was a little kid. I actually have 3 dogs. One of them is here with me now. But I have 3 dogs. I have 30 ducks and 4 rabbits, and on my little homestead. My birth father was someone who was always very connected to animals as well. I've always kind of felt that sometimes animals understood me a little bit better than people did. And we got along better than I did with other people.
I feel that.
Yeah. So the animal medicine, regardless of whether or not you have a spirit animal, and that is like a very specific native tradition that comes with those ceremonies. Like people do all over the world still work with animal medicine and still learn from them. So for me, at least, Amagas, the butterfly, she's here on my leg, and that was a symbol of me transforming into myself and coming out of that cocoon that I was locking myself into. These are these would be my ancestors. These are pollockfish, designed by my cousin David Moses Bridges. And we have other spirit helpers in our culture too. We have Gugech, Bigfoot. We have the Lampequinwag, the mermaids. We have the little people. So these are all different spirits and different medicines that we learn from. And so what I'm supposed to mainly learn from Eagle is like my grandfather teaching, as they would call it, is that my teaching is love. And that's what I'm supposed to walk with and move forward. I'm not always the greatest at it, but I try.
Thank you so much. That's beautiful.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes.
I have brought my baskets of time, and I'm wondering if you would consider autographing your portion of
I can do that, yes.
the thing.
Of course. Hi.
Hi, Gio. So I have a question. You have a background in museums, right? So
Yes.
you've worked in museums in the past, and as I was listening to you, I was kind of thinking that you're still educating, and can you talk about how education and medicine kind of go hand in hand or intersect?
Sure. I mean, I guess I would see that educating is in and of itself its own form of medicine. Because I think that so much of our misunderstandings, especially in the past, have come from assumptions and come from misconceptions and come from language barriers and cultural barriers where like you literally cannot see the wholeness of the other culture. And in particularly with Native people, there was so much that was perceived by colonial Americans and then misconstrued. So I think that, at least for me, like that education, like that very much is bringing that medicine, because people, I've always found, really naturally want to learn and are really naturally curious and are even often afraid to ask the wrong question. And especially in Native culture, like there are certain questions you're not even allowed to ask. You're not allowed to ask elders certain questions without passing them tobacco first. So like any of those tobacco questions would be teachings that I wouldn't share here. It would only be in ceremony. I've even asked an elder a tobacco question and she gave me my tobacco back and she's like, no, you have to wait until I'm in front of the fire next year. You have to wait a whole year to hear that teaching again. And you better remember it next time. So yeah, I find that people often really, really want to learn, but just don't actually have the opportunity. And they don't know how to differentiate when they are learning from someone who authentically has that knowledge and someone who has taken that knowledge and flipped it for their own consumption and their own capitalist endeavors. So for me, I would say education is medicine. Well, if there are no more questions, of course you can still come up and ask. But again, thank you all for coming.
So do you have any, just anything that you want to say, I guess, to white Mainers who want to get involved and, sort of pay reparation and, just do what we can, I guess.
Well, for paying reparations, my Venmo is @GeoNetson.
Yeah.
I think you're right on that track. As like you can give directly to Native people, and not just Native people. You can give to Native people and Black people, because we both have gone through such parallel traumas on this continent in particular, and Black and Native people have a particularly extra struggle of having to work even harder to be embraced in their Native community and have to fight even harder to be accepted as Native and seen as Native than even their white and Native counterparts. Like, I don't have that same struggle that my Black Native relatives would have. People often don't even question the fact that I'm Native because I'm light-skinned, but they automatically get questioned because their skin is dark. So I would say that reparations is one great way, supporting tribal businesses directly is another way, and just making sure that, that's who you're actually supporting, and that's going to be the hardest part, because there are a lot of pretendians in Maine. It is actually against Maine state law to impersonate a Wabanaki person for financial benefit. That was something that was written into our laws because people were actively trying to not only market themselves, but get into the University of Maine system and take advantage of the tuition waiver that is in place for Wabanaki people. So I think that's going to be the biggest part, is just making sure you know who you're talking to. And I think one thing that a lot of the pretendians don't know is that Indian country is really small. Like, if we don't know you, we know your grandma, and we're gonna check. We're gonna call people and find out what community you're from, and if you really have the permission to share the things that you're teaching. So I would say keep going on that same track, that same thought track that you already have. Just make sure that you're giving it to the right people.
With that, I think this is about time for us to wrap up. Thank you again, Geo, for